And it's now my immense pleasure to introduce the amazing Ece Temelkuran. We are incredibly delighted that Ece is here. We know that it's an incredibly busy time for her because she's launching her new book, Nation of Strangers, Rebuilding Home in the 21st Century, and there are actually wonderful connections to what Rajal just said about belonging, as you will hear. So Ece is about to launch this book, the German translation in Germany this week and next week, but she found time to be with us here today. And that's particularly meaningful because when Christina, Koyo, Daniel, Philip and I were thinking exactly 1 year ago about the topic of the Engadin Art Talks 2026, we had Ece's book together, 10 Choices for a Better Now, on the table. And it's an extraordinary book which is showing us the necessity of togetherness in the 21st century through 10 chapters. Choose hope over faith, choose the whole reality, choose to befriend fear, choose dignity over pride, choose attention over anger, choose strength over power, choose enough over less, choose the reef over the wreck, choose friendship, and last but not least, choose to be together. And this notion of bringing fields together, of bringing people together, also maybe people who usually wouldn't talk to each other, is so essential, I think, in so many exhibitions and art practices right now, which is why Ece's book keeps coming up. We've just been working with Brian Eno at the Serpentine. It's still there for the next 2 weeks on Peter Dark's House of Music, where Peter Dark brings together music and painting, and also via the collaboration with Derek Walcott, poetry, and then through Michael Clark, dance. And in this House of Music, we again, were thinking of Ece's book, particularly when Brian, who brought us actually together. I want to thank you, Brian Eno, because Brian Eno, many years ago, said there is someone you should know, and that's how the dialogue with Ece really started. But we can see this also with artists who work with digital media, the importance really of creating this togetherness. Ece is a journalist, a writer, an author, a novelist, and also a visual artist. And this new book, which is launched this week, and which you can all find in German, I think as of next week, that's correct, as of February, is basically the completion of a trilogy. It began with How to Lose a Country, the 7 Steps from Democracy to Fascism, published actually as the first book in this trilogy, then the book I mentioned, Together, 10 Choices for a Better Now, and now the new book. We're incredibly excited that Ece will now give us a talk here for Engadin Art Talks, and we will then be in conversation. Please give Ece Temelkuran a very, very warm welcome.
Hello, everyone. I think I'm not tall enough to stand here, so I'll stand here. First of all, my thank yous. Hans, Philip, Daniel, and Christine. Thank you so much for inviting me here. And more importantly, I am absolutely honored that this beautiful meeting has been inspired by my book. So yeah, it's just deeply moving. That was unexpected. And to Dale, Dan, and Miriam, thank you. I can see the big labor behind this, but you make it absolutely effortless, so bravo. I actually prepared a very nice speech, well, before coming here a few weeks ago. I sent it to Dale. But then things happen. Nowadays, in 1 week, decades happen. So I, gave up the idea of giving that very nice speech, and I decided to talk about what's happening today a little bit and start the journey from there. Only a few days ago, very close to here in Davos, only 1.5 hours train ride, I think, the new world order has been proclaimed. Canadian Prime Minister made a speech saying that the world is no more. The world as we know it is no more. And then we watched Trump and people like him coming together and establishing the new world order. So a lot of ugliness is happening there. And very close to that ugliness and terrifying stuff, to be honest, there we are here, trying to build something beautiful. I think the discrepancy between the ugly and the beautiful What they are trying to do there and what we are trying to do here is telling very much about the world that is to come. So I want to talk about that, but before that, I have to tell you the journey that I have taken for the last 10 years. 10 years ago, I left my country because there was a lot of fascism. They were threatening to kill me and rape me in very colorful details. I was receiving these emails. And also, fascism is a funny thing. You constantly think about pajamas. Because they always come to you at 4 o'clock in the morning. They knock at your door. So they don't only imprison you, but they also shame you on your, depending on your choice of nightwear. So after a while, I noticed that fascism is, even if you're against it, it is somehow stupefying. It dumbs you down because you cannot think anything else but to say no to something. And to constantly be courageous is quite exhausting emotionally. So I left the country in 2016, and suddenly I started to write in English. The funny thing is, when I came to Europe, I noticed that what had been happening in Turkey for the last 20 years was only starting to happen in Europe and in the United States. So I wrote How to Lose a Country, the 7 steps from democracy to fascism. And in this book, I laid out the logic of the new kind of fascism. It was 7 steps, and these were also 7 global patterns of rising fascism. Even though the countries were completely different from each other, I noticed that fascism, the new form of it, operates in exactly the same terms in every country, in exactly the same way. So anyhow, for about 2 years, I went around the world for 2 times. I terrified the audiences, talking like a political Cassandra, saying that this will happen to you, this will happen to you. But then there's this funny thing about humanity. They don't take you seriously when you are being very, very serious, when you're not joking enough. So many European countries, audiences in many European countries and the United States, thought that they were exceptional, that it wouldn't happen to them, that they had these amazingly fortified institutions. Well, and then a few years later, you know what happened. So meanwhile, I thought, terrifying people is not enough, or laying out the logic is not enough. Understanding is not enough, because we entered the age of believing, not knowing, but believing. So I started thinking, what is wrong? Why is nobody really taking this seriously? Why isn't nobody seeing, not nobody, but so few people only seeing what is going to happen to them very soon? It already started. That was the year 2019. And everybody, just like in previous sessions, was asking for hope. After I terrified them, every audience, the first question was, so where is hope? Because I convinced them now it's going to happen to them as well. So where is hope? And I kept thinking about this question, and I was supposed to write a solution to the problem. So I wrote together, and I understood that it's not hope they're asking for. It's not hope that is lost. It is the faith. People lost faith in themselves, in each other, in politics, in democracy, and in humanity, and most importantly, in future. So that loss of faith, I thought, why is there? I mean, why is it that we don't believe in ourselves in terms of changing the world anymore? So I noticed that there is a bigger problem than politics. It is a moral problem. You see, we're living in a system, call it neoliberalism, capitalism, which has a definition for humans. It says that humans are self-centered, selfish bastards who survive by stepping on each other, by taking from the other, by killing the other. So this definition of humankind has been so imposed on us for several decades that we forgot that we could be better than that. We actually lost our faith in being better. So I understood that the political insanity that we are going through at the moment cannot be cured by some fixes and here and there, by some fortifying democracy tricks. We have to go through some moral transformation. We have to regain our faith in ourselves. Only then we can come together. Only when we can believe in each other, we can build a togetherness. So together came out from that idea. Another funny thing about humanity. When you terrify them, they are hypnotized. They don't do what you tell them to do. They don't notice, they don't understand perhaps, but they're hypnotized. And there is this secret lust for being afraid in all of us. And we love the paralysis that comes with fear. Because after writing together, again, I went around the world for 2 times, talking to the same audiences, while they were watching me when I was talking about how to lose a country with, wide open eyes and so on. This time, when I'm telling them about the solutions, suddenly they're laid back. They're like scrutinizing. And the first reaction is always the same, a smirk. This is a little bit too naive. These 10 values that you listed, dignity, friendship, attention, etc., they're too naive. It cannot change the world. We cannot change anything with these things. So I noticed another thing about humanity after writing together. The loss of faith has gone so deep that we cannot talk about faith in ourselves, love among humans, and a possible revolution without a smirk. We don't take ourselves seriously anymore. We do not allow ourselves to take ourselves seriously. So after that, I came to notice, I had to think about another question. So what is that one word that I can tell to these people that will take them from their heart and that would really go deep inside them to understand what's happening to humanity, to understand the human condition today and the perils of it? Then, hit it, baby. I promised him to say that. So that's why I wrote Nation of Strangers. Nation of Strangers is about home. As I told you, in 2016, I sort of lost my home, and I started wandering in Europe. For 7 years, I didn't want to think about that because Europeans love this term of exile. They find it exotic and somehow sexy. Whenever I tell them about politics, ideas, and so on, they tell me, so tell us about exile. How do you feel about it? And I always felt this term of exile being a privilege because refugees or immigrants are never asked their story, but exiles like me, we're always on stage and we have to talk about our pain and so on. And I think it gives too much credit to Europe because many refugees are being pushed back to death in sea, whereas we are put under the spotlight. So anyway, I didn't want to talk about my homelessness. I didn't want to think about it. It was emotionally very exhausting. It was a very deep question of dignity, etc., etc. But finally, I understood that the human condition, for the first time perhaps, was in sync with my own personal condition, which is homelessness. I noticed that the world is losing home. We're not losing home because of wars, not only because of wars or because of climate change. Millions of people are becoming refugees, immigrants, asylum seekers. But we are, even in this very privileged environment, losing home on several different levels. We're losing home morally because the moral compass of the world has broken since last 2 decades especially. We don't know where to turn when we want to know the truth. What the right thing to do, and so on. We are becoming homeless politically as well. We are constantly voting for those parties that we do not really believe in. It's mostly like this. So that makes us politically homeless. We are spiritually homeless because AI is now becoming the second thing in the human history that speaks human language. Language has been our spiritual home, and AI is now an unhuman entity, is speaking the language, and most of the time better than us. So who are we if we are not our language as humans? And we are becoming emotionally homeless as well. Because, as Ivan said in the beginning, it is not hope when you are in the mode of survival. Hope is for beginners, or hope is for the faint-hearted. And that's the beginning of together, by the way. Faith is the thing you need. Someone is there waiting for me. I can do this. I will have to do this. The need to believe is the thing that makes you survive. So as human beings, we are emotionally homeless today because we are in the survival mode. It doesn't feel like that maybe in this particular environment, but we are going to survive. Maybe some of you are rich enough to have bunkers somewhere, but even those people will be homeless because they will have to escape from humanity, from the rest of humanity, to take shelter in their bunkers. So they're going to be refugees. Maybe some of you have tickets to Mars already. I'm like, maybe you know Elon Musk, and you have a good stomach to be his friend. But even then, even if you're on Mars, you're a refugee, you're homeless. Even if you are privileged enough to save yourself from the perils of today, you are becoming homeless. So that's why I wrote Nation of Strangers, because we are now all strangers. We are living in the survival mode, all of us. The things I say sometimes depress people, whereas I expect them to be cheerful. Being strangers, being in the survival mode, becoming homeless gradually is something very humbling, because then you turn from somebody to nobody. And being nobody, the knowledge of being nobody, gives you not only humility, but also liberation. In my personal story, I went through that. I was somebody, very important somebody in my country, and suddenly in one day I became nobody in another language. And I learned a lot from that. And we all will have to learn a lot from that. So in this 10-year-long journey that started with How to Lose a Country, continued with Together, and finished with Nation of Strangers, I had to, I tried to understand what keeps us going. What is human? What is humane? What will keep us humane? Because when you're a stranger, as we are all now, the one thing you have to know is how to survive while staying humane. That is the main question. How to survive with dignity. That is the morality of survival. Since we are all strangers now, I think we can all understand when I say it is not hope, it is not privileges, it is not strength, it is not power that makes you survive. It is the urge to create beauty. And when I say beauty, I don't only mean art. I don't only mean aesthetic beauty. I also mean moral beauty, political beauty, and personal beauty in our personal relationships. That is the only thing that makes us survive. When Ivan was talking, I remember the story that I told in Together. In a concentration camp, and my Dutch editor told me this story. Her grandfather was a survivor. And her grandfather fell in love in the concentration camp. Of course, everybody's skinny, there's nothing to eat. Horrible situation. But then this young guy somehow found a very, very small rotten cabbage. And he stuck the cabbage to a stick and he gave it to the girl. And then they fell in love and they got married. So what interests me in this story is not the genius of the man. It is the thing that happens between those two people. What is it that gives the girl to imagine that cabbage as a rose? How that consensus happens between these two people. That is creating beauty in between these two people. But we can enlarge that, and we can think about creating moral beauty. We can think about creating political beauty. We can think about enlarging of our understanding of pain to what's happening in the world today, and we can empathize with them, what's happening in Gaza, what's happening in Sudan. Why did we lose faith in ourselves so much that we now today think that we cannot do anything to change it? That's happening so far away. That's happening somewhere we cannot reach. So how do we create moral beauty today? Personally, as I said, well, during these 10 years, I was a survival automaton, talking about politics all the time and not looking at my own pain. And through this book, Nation of Strangers, I looked at my own pain. And something interesting happened to me. Then be ready for the movie. Something strange happened to me. It was so powerful. During these 10 years, first I was in Zagreb, and there are no small coffee spoons in Zagreb for some reason. So I started, stealing coffee spoons from cafes. And then it became a thing. It became a habit. Because when you lose home, as we are all doing now, the sense of time and the sense of self transforms. It becomes incomprehensible, especially the sense of time. So I started stealing spoons to mark the time. I was in Italy, in Rome, doing this, so I stole this spoon. I was in Barcelona doing this, so I stole this spoon. So there is a proof of time, so there is a proof of me. So at the end of writing period, at the end of last summer, I found these Italian artists in Rome who are working with very ancient printing machines. We came together, and I forced them into this project. We made this project called Strange Spoons. Stranger spoons or strange spoons. You'll see at some point that in the background it's written, you lost your home, time is unreal, self is unreal, and you understand that you are nothing else but what you remember with others. So they printed all the spoons in papers, and I put my spoons on the wall, and there are some spoons I don't remember the memory about, they're hanging from the ceiling, and their printed spoons became the castle, the shelter that protects my time, myself. So I really understood that it is not writing books, it is not creating beauty, it is not this and that. Only with others we can exist. When you're a stranger, your survival depends on that. Your physical survival actually depends on kindness of others. But then your spiritual, mental, emotional survival, which you will have to, I think, experience as well, will depend on others. So then you will, as I did, will have to learn how to speak of love, togetherness, and beauty without a smirk. And this is all I wanted to say now. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you so much, Ece. One thing I wanted to ask you is actually the format of this new book, because I received an advance copy some weeks ago, and there was a letter in the advance copy with a very direct address, I think, to everybody who got the book. And it's only when I opened the book and started to read it that I realized that the format of the book is letters. And I think it's very important because in our time of a lot of, email exchanges, all kinds of messenger exchanges, text exchanges, the art of letter writing has sort of, or the beauty also of letter writing, risks to disappear. So I was really touched by this idea that it's a book of letters. I wanted to ask you to tell us about this format and why you chose for Nations of Strangers, for the theme of rebuilding home, to use the format of the letters.
One of the reasons is that there's too much noise on social media, in political world. There's so much noise. Everybody's shouting. Everybody's advertising themselves. We are almost exhausted of advertising ourselves constantly with our intimate world. So much noise. So I thought in such a noisy environment, only a whisper could be audible. That is why letters, because letters always whisper. They don't shout. Another answer, this book is my coming home, homecoming. Because I'm going back to literature, I'm going back to who I am, and so on. And one part of letter is, one part of the answer is that before I learned to write, when I was 5 or so, I was writing letters. I was imitating adults, their handwriting, and writing letters. My mother was the only translator of those letters. So I think I am going back to roots in a way, because letters have been there before I learned to write and read.
There is also a very important work in the book. You used it briefly in the talk, but I wanted to ask you to tell us a bit more about that, and that's the word unhomed. It's a word which I didn't know before reading your book. It's a really almost forgotten English word, and I think it was used much, much more in the 19th century, and you asked for a resurrection of this term. Can you tell us more about this?
When you come to a language, like I did in later ages, I started writing in English when I was 43, and last 9 years, 10 years now. Last 10 years I'm writing in English. You kind of make an ambition to be precise. Precision becomes your obsession, like Nabokov, he was like that too. So you learn a lot of vocabulary that normal people do not even use. So I found this word, it was first used in 19th century, unhomed. I think it is such a nice word because it doesn't say homeless. It doesn't say, it tells the verb, somebody unhomed you. It's not that you left home, you are unhomed. So I think what is the human condition today, it's a very convenient word for human condition because we do not leave our home, we are unhomed. And it applies to my personal situation too, especially, of course.
Some years ago, we worked with Marina Abramovic on a show which has to do with that because she didn't want anyone to have between her and the audience. So she was 512 hours in the exhibition space, and she kind of put visitors to bed. And so it provoked, so visitors could sleep in the exhibition. It created a very interesting experience because it's a memory to childhood when, our parents would put us to bed. And you talk about home is where you rest and where you're held. So I wanted to ask you to tell us a bit more about that, but then also about your desire now to, in a way, build a home. Because you've been talking, you gave a DLD, there was an interview you gave to a podcast, which I was listening to this morning. And you told the podcast that you kind of want to imagine an institute for home.
Yeah.
So, and yesterday we heard from Ottobourne about the farm, and we see more and more artists now creating their own institutions, creating their own, and obviously the same with writers. And in Istanbul, it's Orhan Pamuk who actually wrote the novel, and then the novel produced the museum. But I think your idea is different from Orhan.
Yeah, Orhan is a solitary person. I'm not. I really believe in what I say. Home is in others. Home is only possible with others. So I am actually imagining a center, a place, an institute for home, because we will have to think about home on different levels, not only because we become refugees or exiles or immigrants, but because of the reasons that I talked about earlier, because of moral homelessness, because of political homelessness. So that is why actually I'm imagining it in Athens, a center for home, that people come together to rebuild home for the 21st century, aesthetically, morally, politically, in whichever you'd like to think. I wasn't expecting that question, so this is very new in my head, so yeah.
No, but it's fascinating because it's such a new idea. And when I was listening to the podcast, I thought I need to
Yeah.
ask you. Another thing, and maybe then we can open it up, is you mentioned briefly also AI, and we've been working now with Holly Herndon and Matt Dryhurst on the call, where they trained an AI model on a choral group, proposing new rituals for the age of AI. How can we introduce rituals into this world of AI? And you've written recently an article on AI where you pose the questions: where is our spiritual home if it is being taken over by AI? And as we feed basically an AI entity with our emotions, will humans desert their humanness? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. Like the problem, as we all know, problem is not AI. Problem is who's running AI. We always talk as if it's a cloud. It's a thing that happened to us. No, there are people who are steering the direction, the moral and political direction of this thing. So that is the problem. And these people are not the best human beings on Earth. Unfortunately, they are running the most powerful machine entity that humanity produced, but they do not have the moral capacity to use it for the good of humanity. So that is the main question. But spiritual homelessness, because of AI, made me think of the movie Frankenstein, the new version of it. In the new version, I don't know about the old versions. At the very end, I don't know how many people saw it, Dr. Frankenstein says to the thing, to his creation, to his monstrous creation, son. And love, love cures the monster. When I speak of love, it's not easy to be on the same page, because this word has been monopolized by religion for such a long time, for thousands of years, that we cannot imagine love in political sphere, in our social life, easily. We constantly think those words as belonging to religious realm: love, humility, joy, joy of dignity, another concept from together. So anyhow, my point is, how can we treat AI with love? We constantly have this urge to say please and thank you to AI when we're asking questions. I wrote another article in German. It was published in German. What is the price of please and thank you? Because we have the urge to be nice, because this thing is speaking like human, so we cannot not treat it like a human. So I find this very precious, our urge to say please and thank you, because we are trying to stay humane, even in the face of a monster. So how can we feed this machine with love? How can we steer this machine towards love, not hate and surveillance and all the sinister things? How can we do that? So this is the question. This becomes then the question: can we share our spiritual home language with AI if it is steered and shaped by human love?
And maybe a last question. But no, I think I'm getting a sign that we are almost out of time. So we should open it up. I think we should open it up. Are there questions or comments? Yes. If you can have the microphone.
Thank you so much. This was such an incredible talk and
Thank you.
set of thoughts, most importantly, and on the human condition and human nature, most importantly. And as I was listening to you, I was also wondering about, as you were ending, not only talking about AI, but also speaking of our need for each other in order, to become or to find a home again. And I was wondering what the place, because there are certain conditions for us to be capable of doing that, right? I wonder if one of the conditions is our ability to be able to see ourselves in others. So then I just wanted to ask you a question about empathy. And where do you think, or where is the place of empathy when we see, when we are a nation of strangers, and how is that empathy possible?
Empathy But first, I have to tell something. As I told you during the talk, many people thought that Together is a naive book. The funny part of that fact is that those people were not in the ground doing the actual work. Whereas those people who are, working in politics, doing the NGO work in the most horrible places, they loved the book and they understood the book. So, and now, right now in Barcelona, actually there's an initiative together with Médecins Sans Frontières and Oxfam, inspired by Together, they are building a new NGO. So I'm very, very proud of it. I'll come to empathy now. These words, I don't like the word empathy. It's not because it's naive. It's like the word, the reason I don't like hope. It's for beginners. Empathy is for beginners as well. It's quite primitive empathy. Empathy is like putting yourself in the shoes of, we are better than that. We can be millions of people. We can think about millions of people. We can think about our ancestors and our, future generations. Empathy is like a Lego. It's like Play-Doh. We are better than that. I think this should be our moral resistance to the imposed definition of human coming from neoliberalism. No, we're better than that. Empathy, that's for kids. You teach it to the kindergarten kids, empathy. Yeah, you think about, no, we're better than that. We can care about humanity as a whole with its past and with its future. I think that exceeds empathy by far, and that also tells who we are, what we could be. Yesterday, I saw an Instagram video. Someone was saying, the hell is running into what you could have been with who you are. I think humanity could have been amazing. And it is already amazing. We're surviving these conditions. It's incredible. What's happening in Minneapolis at the moment is incredible. I don't know if you're following it. People with their nothings, they are, resisting against an incredibly cruel regime. That is political beauty. And political beauty is created every day. Moral beauty is created every day. And all those people creating this beauty selflessly are beyond empathy, I guess.
Thank you. One more question.
I think everything is clear.
If there are no questions, I do have a last question. Oh yeah, we have a question here. If you can please have the microphone in the back. We have a question in the back. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the very good speech. In the title, Nations of Strangers, maybe lies already kind of a solution, because if we are a nation of strangers, we are all, and if we are all in the same position, we have as common ground again. And I think if we take that, what you think about that?
Unfortunately, I don't believe in the we're in the same ship thing, but you are right. This is what I'm trying to say. You might look like you're privileged. I'm telling to everybody that we're all becoming strangers. So one of the most important sentences in that book is drop the act. Let's drop the act. And I say this to intellectual milieu, artistic milieu, political higher echelons of politics, and so on and so forth. And so that's why it was important in Davos that they finally admitted that the world order is no more, because they are now finally, very belatedly, dropping the act. And we can think about this in our personal lives, in our political lives, in the lives of our countries, and so on. We should all drop the act, and we should admit that our reality is survival right now. Not only physical survival, but moral and political survival. So yeah, but I think again, it will take several years for people to acknowledge that we are all strangers. And that's why I wrote it in letters, so it's intimate, that it goes to you, directly to you, so that you, everybody, can understand this strangeness that we are going through.
And you begin the book, and that's my last question, with a quote by Brayton Breitenbach from The Long March from Hearth to Heart. The quote goes, "One can replace, to all intents and purposes, the word exile by refugee, misfit, outcast, outsider, expatriate, squatter, foreigner, clandestine, heretic, stranger, renegade, drifter, or displaced person, marginal one." It's a long list. And you say if we add up all these individuals, we probably find ourselves, a silent new majority. Can you tell us about Brayton Breitenbach and why that's important and why that's the beginning of the book?
Yeah, Brayton Breitenbach is a South African poet. He wrote his poetry in Afrikaans, but his essays in French and in English. With Joseph Brodsky, they are the two guys who made this book possible, actually, because they were the two men, unfortunately men. Hannah Arendt is also a big presence in the book. But they were the ones who talked about the dignity, matter of dignity during survival. They were the ones who did not want to be called as exile, like I did. So they were the ones who went through the 7 bloody hells of exile and still created beauty with their dignity intact. So I took them as my moral compass while writing the book. That's why he's such a prominent figure in the book, with Brodsky, Hannah Arendt, and Elizabeth Bishop, actually.
Thank you so much. A big round of applause.
Thank you. Thank you.